morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And obviously, there's been a lot of class design and reworks so far throughout the Midnight Beta and the Midnight Alpha. And I wanted to give an up-to-date tier list regarding the melee DPS in today's video. And I want to focus in on specifically gameplay because tuning and strength and viability is just going to be doing this. You know, it's just going to be every whatever dungeon week test. Everything's going to get shifted around, and it's impossible to really tell you what's going to be the strongest or the weakest right now. And I will be updating news videos with those patch changes. So if you want to see what the direction of your class is going, make sure to hit the subscribe button because I always do those videos as soon as they're basically available. Main focus of this video is talking about the rework, the overall gameplay loop of the specialization. Was the pruning of the specs successful or not? Are you going to be looking to get more kind of build options potentially from your specialization? I feel like that's a better outlook for it at this current stage of the alpha or the beta, because everything else kind of just feels like almost like fraudulent in some sense. But I feel like this is stuff that it could still change. We've seen some specs getting some updates like Subtlety Rogue recently. So it likely will change, and I'll do my best to update this as things progress. And as we get closer to the release, then I'll likely start releasing more performance-oriented videos. I also do think like the performance-oriented videos can sometimes help them see balance changes. I feel like if I was designing the game and I went to a bunch of different content creators and took the average of all of their tier lists, because every content creator is going to be a little bit biased, they're not going to be 100% accurate, took like the average, it could give you an idea of like anything that's an outlier that needs to be brought down, or anything that needs to be brought up. So I do think they help with just overall like getting a good idea of where all the specs are at to try and get everybody into a more equal playing field, because obviously it really sucks when you go into the next expansion and your spec's not a top performer, and then you have a hard time getting into groups and you just feel like you're struggling against everything. But some people like that perspective of being the underdog and making it work despite that. But it's like, to how much degree are you an underdog, right? You don't want to just be completely terrible and suffering and just completely unviable unless you're a total masochist who really likes that type of challenge, which again, it's probably some people. So I've broken it down with so sick, like the spec just looks really cool with all the gameplay changes moving into it, and I have really high expectations for it. Solid is just like, they've done a really good job with it. Same is kind of just, it's not really a lot going on with it. Maybe it's mostly cosmetic, or maybe it's possibly not moving in the best direction. I think that's probably better for like worse. And then yikes is like, oh my god, what's going on, right? Because I know a lot of people have been making videos about their specs, and some of them have been yikes. So hopefully your spec's not going to be down there by the end of this video. But let's get started. We're doing all the melee DPS for this one. We got the Arms Warrior up first. So for Arms Warrior, you still got a decent amount of keybind bloat is my first analysis of this, especially comparing it to some other specializations. You have a lot of choices between like maintaining rend on the target. Slam is a lot more integral in the rotation, especially with the Apex talents that converted into Heroic Strike, which is a nice little nostalgia throwback for armor penetration, which I think is going to be a cool gameplay loop. I wish it had a better animation. Is my only like personal gripe with the Heroic Strike. I mean, Heroic Strike obviously in vanilla didn't have the most insane animation either, but I just feel like we're in 2025 and it's like your sword gets like this weird little blue thing and you don't even really notice it. I would prefer if the Heroic Strike actually got like a little bit of a cooler animation. Spear of Bastion is now getting a Heroic Leap attached to it. I think it's called the Champion Spear now. I hate when they rename stuff because then I get confused trying to remember what expansion what was what. But the Champion Spear gives you Heroic Leaps. You're getting a lot of mobility. So which is nice. They responded really well to the feedback from the initial pruning and brought back a lot of stuff. So previously they'd taken Avatar away, but Avatar is returning. So this is really good. They've made Slayer, the hero talent tree, a lot more focused around Bladestorm. It's like very much so the Bladestorm tree, and I think that's cool because it really amplifies the talent decisions between the specialization tree in combination and tandem with the hero talents as well. And then Colossus still focuses on kind of like big massive swings of AoE damage, which is really cool. So for me, it's probably honestly more or less the same, and I'm trying to consider like all aspects of the game here when it comes to dungeons, when it comes to PvP. It's kind of the same, but I think it's still kind of solid. It's like somewhere in between. For me, I don't think you're going to be logging in on it and going like, oh my god, what happened to my Arms Warrior? This is like totally not my class anymore. I don't think that's going to happen, and I think it's still likely in a solid spot with everything being introduced to it. Now Warrior hasn't been at the top of the the food chain, whether it's dungeons or PvP for quite some time though, which can be a little bit problematic. So I do have some concerns there. We'll have to track the tuning with the patch adjustment notes as things go on. But I think it's honestly probably like better to just kind of put it in the same, because it mostly is the same. Now your healing capabilities are much higher though than in any previous patch, maybe expansion, maybe since Mists of Pandaria. So that might be something to take into account. The second wind and the dressing talents on your class tree really provide you a lot of healing. And I do think you're a decently strong class at the moment, but again, it's kind of regardless, could go up or down. But as far as gameplay loop mechanics, I think it honestly feels about the same. But it's still a good pick. Same, but it's still a good pick. Fury Warrior, this one was already just a really good spec if you just wanted to go in and hit stuff. Very simple and straightforward specialization. And much like Arms Warrior, I don't think the gameplay loop of it is changing too much. It's the same type of deal where Slayer is focusing in quite heavily onto Bladestorm, which is a nice little kind of emphasis change there. You still have a lot of different combinations of cooldowns. So for me, I think honestly Warrior is kind of just more or less the same since the rework. So if you liked it before, you're still going to like it now. Which is the trade-off there. I'm trying to think and remember if there's anything particularly like amazing. I guess honestly for Fury Warrior, it's transmog. You're going to be able to transmog one-handers from two-handers, and it seems like they're getting a little more lenient on a lot of stuff like that. I saw something with daggers as well recently, so I'm gonna have to keep an eye on that, because I'm very much so on the side of like just open up transmog, bro. Just let people look at design their character the way that they want to with their own kind of fantasy and flavor at this point, right? So I think cosmetically, do I want to include cosmetics when I'm deciding this, being able to transmog one-handers? Is that worth putting it up onto solid? Because like for me, I feel like it's kind of just, it feels the same more or less. I mean, there's a couple of keybinds taken out, but not a huge amount. I think it's just the core of it is about the same. But I think Arms and Fury both had a strong core. I think in PvE, it's always been kind of a tuning issue, determining their viability. And then in PvP, it's always been everybody has too much mobility. But to be fair, everyone's mobility is going down. So like the mages and the hunters and all that stuff's going down. So you will feel better, but not because too much really is changing with you. It's because everything's changing with everybody else. So like, I don't know if I should put it on solid or same. I'm kind of in a weird spot with that one. That's why I think it's important when you're looking at these tier lists to listen to the commentary as to why a spec might be going in a specific tier, because oftentimes there's more to it than just, oh, that one looks better than that one. Now, Enhancement Shaman, this is one where like, if it doesn't get tuned to be good, obviously no one's going to want to play it. But the rework itself, I really love. So before, Enhancement Shaman was just super bloated. Shaman in general, very bloated. Lots of keybinds. Lots of spells just lighting up on your action bar at the same time. And you're just like, what do I do? Like, there's 4 things lighting up. And I really like how they've pruned Enhancement Shaman down to just Storm Strike and Lava Lash, and focusing the 2 builds, hyper-focusing them in on those 2 aspects. I think it's a lot better than trying to incorporate like wind and incorporate frost and all of this at the same time. Now, maybe they could like in the future add a 4th spec to Shaman that focuses on wind and frost or something like that. Maybe that's something they could do, like a Frost Witch Shaman or something like that. But I like Enhancement Shaman having less focus, at least rotationally. You still do a frost and wind spells, but they're more passive as opposed to active abilities. So you're still using all the elements. It's just not the active portions of your rotation. I think that has made it a lot better. I think it's made it a lot better in terms of gameplay. Now, again, much like Warrior, at least in PvP situations, with mobility was the biggest issue. In PvE, it's a numbers game. But do note that interrupt cooldowns, I don't actually think for Enhancement is still keeping a low cooldown. I think it's just Resto Shaman's Wind Shear is going up to 30 seconds. All the healers losing interrupts are going up. But Enhancement has a lot of disruption still in its kit. So I think for me, I'm going to put Enhancement Shaman on So Sick right now, at least from its like core rework gameplay mechanical loop. This is not performance, because if I was basing this on performance, I don't know. Again, it would depend on its PvE, PvP rating, dungeons. There's a whole complicated list there. But as far as like mechanics, right? Like you log in, you're like, okay, this is nice. I like this. The experience isn't overbearing. I think they've improved it dramatically. Now, Feral Druid. Main one with this one is that they just took blood talents away. So if you didn't like the snapshotting with the regrowths and trying to figure out where to go in that regard, there is still snapshotting with Tiger's Fury. But they've also added new animations to the what's the word I'm looking for? The not the tooltip, but the icon. The icon changes colors when you have empowered bleeds. So if you pop Tiger's Fury and then apply your bleeds, you'll see them in a darker red, and you'll know that, oh, I got empowered bleeds on that target. I'll wait to refresh them. I don't want to replace them with a lesser empowered version of those bleeds. So I like that improvement to the UI. I think if you're someone who didn't like Blood Talons, which I was kind of on that fence, you're going to enjoy Feral Druid more. If you did like Blood Talons, though, you're going to be not too excited, right? That level of complexity is gone. They've also taken Thrash out recently. That's why I say like these class changes are constantly ongoing. So I'll do my best to try and keep tabs on this list as things go on and relay that information to you. But for me, Feral Druid always had too many attack abilities. So I think taking those back, trying to make things a little more passive is probably the right move with it. The new ability Chomp I really like, which is a low energy ability, which obviously if you're spamming Ferocious Bites, you're just out of energy. Spamming shreds out of energy, you're gonna have this new chomp that you can use, so you're not just sitting there with like no buttons to press, which honestly Arms Warrior can sometimes have issues with, I've noticed, but you're able to have chomp. So for me, I think Feral Druid is probably just solid. Pretty much everything else is remaining about the same. I do suppose, at least in PvP situations, Heart of the Wild no longer giving you fast cyclones, so that might be felt pretty hard in a PvP side of things as far as gameplay, right? Especially with being in melee range and all that stuff and trying to go for cyclones, that window is going to be a lot harder to implement. But rotationally in the mechanics of the class, I'd say it's a solid improvement, because Feral was probably one of the most complex melees, other than maybe Outlaw Rogue, just because of all of its like weak ores required to play it. Maybe it was a little bit harder, but it was definitely like second hardest or close to most difficult melee. And I think that they've done a good job of retaining its core identity. But I do think for players who liked that advanced level loop, that they might be a bit upset. But if you're not in that loop, then it will feel very solid. Havoc Demon Hunter, not really too much changing, other than they're focusing, or I should say they're shifting their focus from the essence break window, which is like you had this like 4-second window where you had to use the right GCDs, and that determined your damage for like the next 30 seconds. And if you didn't use it right, then you were just poopy. They're taking a lot of focus away from that. So that's similar to how Ret Paladin, where you kind of just like bonk and hit stuff and you got a decent performance. I think Demon Hunter is going into the bonk performance level. And Demon Hunter in the War Within is actually one of the more challenging melee DPSs because of that window around your Essence Break and your Eye Beam and your Demons Within. Like, it makes it a lot harder to get actually effective performance out of it. So they're trying to shift that mandatory requirement away. They've got some they're experimenting with stats. They're doing the same thing with Subtlety. I don't know if they'll actually deliver on it successfully, but I do appreciate their efforts in it to try and balance out different stat profiles, because for a lot of classes it's like you stack mastery, and if you go haste, you're an idiot. You're going to do no damage. So I think like you should never go a stat because you're like, oh, I'm going to try a haste Demon Hunter. You shouldn't be like, oh, I'm an idiot. Like, this should be a little closer than it is. So I do appreciate them trying to build up viability of the other secondary stats for classes, and Havoc is one of those. They're trying to bring up the value of other secondary stats. I don't know if they'll achieve it or not, but hopefully they will. But I think it's going to feel a lot just kind of like streamlined and smoother in that regard rotationally. You are losing a little bit of crowd control, losing Fell Eruption. So you're going to be losing a stun. But everybody's getting a little bit taken away, or a little bit taken off the top. And honestly, I am so relieved that they're taking some crowd control away and taking some risks with how crowd control is going to work, because I've been absolutely flipping out when I get CC'd recently. So I think that it's like a necessary risk for them to take. But I think that it'll likely feel solid. It's kind of more samey, but I think that there's a little bit more focus rotationally on it than the Warrior specs that you're going to notice a lot. That it'll be in a solid spot. It'll definitely be easier to play. And again, that is the goal, I think, for almost all the specializations, is that they're trying to make them easier, more accessible. So you wouldn't want a class to be on Yikes, because that means it probably got more complicated, or maybe it got giga pruned and it's just not good at all. But I would say that Havoc is definitely solid. Retribution Paladin, I mean, it's the same, bro. It's the same bonky bonks. They are condensing things down, like Hammer of Wrath, I believe, into Judgment. So it's a little bit less keybinds, which is already not really too big of a deal. Obviously, you're losing Repentance, which is going to be likely felt very big in PvP situations. In PvE, I don't even know if you pressed it ever. Still got a blinding light in PvE, so you still got an AoE interrupt to stun mobs and stuff, so no big deal there, right? You're not going to be losing that. So I imagine PvE is probably just going to feel the same. In PvP, you might notice it feel kind of worse just because you don't have the crowd control builds that you had previously. And then Searing Glare is now a choice with blinding light, so you're losing quite a lot of crowd control there. But again, Ret was really annoying with how much it had. But I am a bit worried about Repentance. I feel like Repentance is kind of like a style choice with it, and it's weird how Ret Paladin went from Repentance has a cooldown to Repentance doesn't have a cooldown to Repentance doesn't exist in the game anymore. We've gone through a very weird like gauntlet of what they think for Repentance, but I think for the most part it's going to feel the same. At least mechanically, rotationally, you'll log in, it'll feel kind of the same, except a little bit less keybinds. So, but for the most part, the same. Now, Survival Hunter, probably not going to feel the same. They've decided to just like do away with anything related to spears, and now it's shotguns and grenades. I feel like they need to rename the spec to Grenader or something, because it's all about explosions and Molotov cocktails in the game. Like it's a lot different. It's a lot simpler. They did decide to keep the tip the spear mechanic, which I am grateful for. I think again they've been very responsive to feedback, because tip the spear is what made survival in my mind. You know, rotating between kill commands and other abilities and amping up their damage, like that gameplay loop made survival feel like its own identity compared to others, even if maybe it's more complex. So I think it was good that they decided to keep that in there, but it's losing a lot of crowd control. I think losing things like scattershot. So it's losing a lot of like finesse abilities. Now in PvE, you probably don't care too much, but you are getting Roar Sacrifice on the baseline tree. It's not crit reduction anymore though, it's damage reduction. So in PvE, that could be a viable tank cooldown. So maybe this is going to increase your viability there. I feel like again in PvE, it's almost always just, are you tanky enough that you don't get one shot? And maybe one shots aren't even going to exist. That's not even a thing to consider anymore. Or it's just how much damage you do. So do the grenades hit really hard? And if they don't, then sorry, bro, Survival Hunter, you can't get in here. But it's still got decent tankiness. I think it's got a lot of defensive cooldown still on its kit. I don't know where I want to put this, because it's like, it doesn't feel the same, but I don't know if it feels better. This might be the first one where I'm going a little bit more harsh on it. I would like them to look at it a little bit more. And honestly, it's kind of rough, because I don't think a lot of people play survival, so it doesn't have like a lot of voices. So like, I don't want to like put this one in the same, and then someone's like, oh, it's terrible on survival. So this is one where I would prefer, if you're a Survival Hunter main, to share your experiences with it as well, and your observations in the comments down below. Because for me, I'm thinking more or less it might feel a little worse. Now rotationally, it's very simple. So rotation definitely improved on the rotation. I'm just worried about like the finesse of the class, and that's again maybe in PvE people don't care about finesse. Just zug big AoE damage, don't care. But I'm a bit worried about its finesse element possibly dropping off. So it's mostly finesse. Rotationally, it's solid. Finesse, I'm a little bit more worried about it. Windwalker Monk, this is one where they're condensing a lot of your cooldowns. Like Monk had a lot of defensives, Diffuse, Fortifying Brew, Touch of Karma. So they're like condensing them into each other. So now when you press Fort Brew, you can talent so it also diffuses. So now maybe I won't have a monk who just doesn't diffuse, because you'll be forced to do it. It's baked into your fortifying brew. So they're kind of like making swifty defensive macros and swifty one-shot macros with the introduction of Zenith, which is like the Storm, Earth, and Fire and Weapons of Order kind of like put together. So that's what they've done as far as simplification for Windwalker, is they're just fusing things together. Zwen is also going into the hero talent tree. So if you know, the extra keybind of the Tiger is only if you're going to Celestials, which I think kind of makes sense. Like he's a Celestial, so he can be kind of the focus point of the Celestial tree. Would have been cool to maybe add a little bit more effects. I should have maybe said cosmetics, at least for survival. You can dual wield now. So yeah, you can dual wield now. So maybe you're losing a little bit of finesse, but you can look like Rexar. So maybe it's not going to be that bad. I don't know. I feel like it could use a little bit more attention. That's why I'm going to put it down here. But for Windwalker, you're getting some cosmetic changes. Zenith makes you turn into like a Super Saiyan with glowing hands. It looks really cool during that window. But I'm worried that it's still going to have the same issue of like no damage outside of Zenith, big damage in Zenith. Which for the longest time, we've had issues with that on other classes. Like Destruction Warlock and even Ret Paladin, I think. And they've redesigned their damage and relocated their damage. And now they feel really good because they're not just only, viable in their cooldown window. And I was kind of hoping that's what they were going to do with Windwalker. And I don't know if they've been able to achieve that. I think that from my testing, at least, it's still highly dependent on, your cooldown window. You still do have hit combo. I can't remember if they've lowered the influence of hit combo by any significance. I don't think they have. I think it's still just like you try to press a different ability every time, basically, in your damage rotation. So I feel like it's probably the same, which maybe for some might be considered to feel worse because like we're expecting a big improvement, right? For Windwalker. The cosmetics look cool. I like the new green glow during the cooldowns. I was just hoping for redistribution of its damage from its cooldown window. Much like Warrior, though, you might feel better mechanically, at least in PvP, because a lot of the roots are getting stripped away. A lot of the crowd control is getting stripped away. A lot of the knockbacks are getting stripped away. So like indirectly, you probably will feel better on this patch, at least in PvP. But rotationally, I think it's for the most part staying the same. I mean, Whirling Dragon Punch and Striking the Windlord are now a choice node, which is a little bit, again, they just like fuse or make you make a choice between different abilities, and we'll have to wait for the tuning to see which ones of those abilities ends up being stronger than the other, and it's probably just going to be like an auto lock choice in those types of situations. But I think it's more, honestly, its core mechanics are more or less the same. I don't think you're going to log on the Windwalker and be like, oh my god, what is this? Other than your defensives are now baked together, your offensives are baked together, but rotation's mostly the same. Subtlety Rogue is a big one. So Subtlety Rogue, honestly, even in the War Within, I think it's gotten a lot simpler. Although its damage window has been very much like Havoc, where it's like you need to know how to do it in this very tiny window of time, and there's a bunch of different modifiers you have to stack together to do it. They're kind of stripping away a lot of that, and they're stripping away the ramp by removing things like Rupture. So you don't need to worry about like setting up a bleed. You can kind of just like go in on your target and start immediately doing damage. And they've lowered the cooldown of Shadow Dance and made it the 20-second cooldown, I believe. And they've baked in Symbols of Death with it, so you don't have to worry about lining up all these different variables together in order to hit that precise window. It's just dance, do damage, dance, do damage. And it's very simple. I think it's very simple. It's very easy. And I've seen a lot of rogues are still kind of upset with the removal of Rupture. From my experience from playing it, not as a main rogue, but I've played to 2400 rating, in many seasons. I kind of like it. I think it might be worth trying a season with no bleed just to play it through. But if it isn't, my suggestion would be to make it so that Rupture's back, but when you press Dance, Eviscerate transforms into Secret Technique and then goes on cooldown. That way, you don't have a separate keybind for Secret Technique and Eviscerate. That's where you can reduce the keybind, and you can keep the difference between combo point finishers, because that's the main issue, right? It's like your finishers are literally just all do damage, because Slice and Dice is passive, so you have to worry about maintaining it. Exposed armor or whatever hasn't existed forever. Basically, it's just like build combo points, do damage with it. It's very similar to Ret Paladin in that regard, where it's just Templar's Verdict anytime you get full, or Divine Storm to do AoE. And it's the same thing with Subtlety. So it's very samey in that sense. But you do still have like Gormaz to make finishers free. Adds a little bit of flavor there. But I think they're trying to shift it away from like this like one-shot window. And hopefully they'll be able to achieve that with the tuning. I think it's honestly good they're taking a risk with it. Hopefully this is going to get more people interested in it, because it's been very complicated in the past. So I think for me, I'll say solid. It's definitely not the same. It's not going to feel the same. You will log on Subtlety Rogue. It's not going to be the same, but I think it's improved in some aspects. Just depends on what they're going to do with combo point finishers, I think. Outlaw Rogue is significantly improved. I really like what they've done with Roll the Bones. Way easier to understand. It just has like a 1, 2, or a 3, and if it's a 1, that's worse than 2, 2 is worse than 3. As opposed to, it's a shark, it's a coin, and there's a thing, and then that thing, and then you're just like, I don't know, I got 3 of them, is that good? No, you didn't get the coin. And they've taken a lot of the cooldown reduction, I should have mentioned also, from Subtlety Rogue, which was adding to the complexity of it. And they've done very similar things with Outlaw Rogue. I really like Outlaw Rogue. I think they've improved. This is probably one of the more challenging specs for them to rein in on complexity without kind of losing its identity. And they're taking some risks. They're removing the crack shot, which was the firing out big kind of between the eyes windows during Vanish. So it's a lot more brawly, which honestly maybe that's what their initial intent was for it. So Outlaw Rogue, do I want to say it's so sick? I don't know if I want to say it's so sick. It's definitely very maybe I will say it's so sick. I think it's a lot better. I think the fact that you're not going to need all the add-ons to track it and things like that, I think it's a lot better. I think it's significantly better. Assassination Rogue. Now, this tier list that I found to make this, I don't think that's the icon for Assassination, but it's the best we're gonna do. Okay, we're just gonna go with this one being Assassination. Big improvements to Deathstalker. I think that's gonna be the first thing that you feel. But they seem to be really hitting on one playstyle, which is like pooling energy and spamming in Venom. So if you don't like that, I don't think you're going to like it, because it just seems like, yeah, this is what it's going to be. From the notes that I've read and how the Apex talents work, it's just like, you got to know how to pool your energy and then spam in Venoms. And that's going to be how your class is, at least for the first season. And maybe, I don't know, because Apex talents, I don't know if they're going to change those season to season, or if that's just locking in, because some of those Apex talents make like one ability like mandatory and have a specific playstyle. So a little bit rough there. In that regard, I think you'll definitely be hit the hardest when it comes to the crowd control changes, because you had Garrote and Cheap Shot, which you could spam to 3 DRs, but you can't anymore, and I'm happy about that. I don't care if you play Assassination Rogue and you're sad about that. I'm tired of getting Garroted 3 times and Cheap Shot 3 times in a row. I don't want to do it. So I'm happy that that's gone, but you will definitely feel that. So for Assassination Rogue, though, rotationally, they are making it so you can spread your bleeds now, as opposed to using Vanish and trying to reapply things and get that going. It's the Crimson Tempest will just spread your bleeds. I think that's something you'll notice more in PvE than you will notice in PvP. I think in PvP, honestly, it'll feel more or less the same, but maybe a little weaker, just because you can't Garrote 3 times. But your damage could be insane. So I don't know if I want to say it's the same or worse. Again, it just depends. It depends on if you like the playstyle of pooling energy and spamming in Venom. I think in PvE, it's solid. So this is the first one where I would have to separate them a bit. I can't really condense them down into the same thing. I think in PvE, this will feel solid. In PvP, you might feel a little weaker with the DR changes. Depends on the tuning, obviously. But for the most part, it's just putting bleeds up, right? Like the core components of it haven't changed. They've just made some improvements to it. So maybe I'll say solid. I don't know, but I think it'll feel weaker, at least in PvP, but I'll put it on solid for now. Unholy DK, I'm really liking where they're going with this one. It seems like every week or every 2 weeks or whatever, they're starting to cook up more combos with the Putrefy ability, which is summoning in lesser ghouls and exploding them and adding synergies with Unholy Aura. I really like what they're doing with it. I'm hoping that they just keep cooking. I'm hoping that a few other specs like Survival and maybe even Frosty K and Windwalker get a little bit more of the kind of specific attention and love that Unholy's getting. So for me, I think mechanically I'm putting it on so sick. I really think the flavor and the fantasy of it's really good. It started off rough, but that's how things need to be. You got a rough draft, you got to work through it, and we're only halfway through the beta, so hopefully it's going to get more poggers from this point. There has been a little bit of keybind reductions with things like Apocalypse and with your Dark Transformation and things like that. So a little bit less keybinds, which is nice. A little bit more simple there, and I really like the flavor so far for it from a fantasy standpoint. So definitely a good one. Frosty K, they're just trying to increase your build variety. They're not taking too much risk. For the most part, it's like Frostbane. They're trying to make Frostbane a little bit more viable. I think it's more or less the same, except that you might have more build. So it's kind of just like similar to Windwalker. I don't think you're log in and be like, wow, Frosty K is so different now. I can't believe it. I think it's just like they're aiming to try and have more build variety and not really taking too much aside from that, increasing the viability of your hero talents in different situations as well. They did prune some defensive abilities, but again, they've done that for every class, so take that kind of with a grain of salt. And much like all the other melee, you guys are probably happy that a lot of the roots are out of the game and a lot of the knockbacks are out of the game, but it's probably more or less the same, which honestly maybe is a little sad, right? Like kind of, when you go to new expansion, you kind of want like a little bit of new goodies, but I kind of feel like Frost is just, they're trying to add, Frostworm's Fury more rotationally. Maybe that feels a little bit better, at least in PvE. But in PvP, I think it's probably going to end up feeling pretty close to the same. I do like that Obliterate, though, does frost damage. That could help you in some situations as far as scaling your stats for viability. So, but that's my general breakdown. Again, this is very early in the beta. I'm sure that there's still going to be work to be done on this. But again, I think it's good to take note of where things are, not so that we can just be like, oh, he's dooming on that, no one's going to play it. It's just so we can maybe draw some attention to Blizzard that, hey, some of these specs could use a little bit more attention and love, and then you won't end up in this spot by the time the game inevitably does release, which is actually in March now that we found out. But that's it for the tier list here. Hope you guys enjoyed the discussion and the breakdown. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.